Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at one of the most fascinating narratives in the Quran, the story of the people of the cave, or ashabalkahf.
It really is a phenomenal subject. We've gone through sources that analyze this from, well, every possible angle: theology, history, even a bit of modern science.
And the core story is so memorable. A group of young believers, they flee persecution, hide in a cave, and then wake up centuries later. But it's so much more than just a miracle story.
Exactly. It functions on, I think, 3 different levels at the same time. You've got the theological argument for a miracle, the historical view of it as ancient folklore, and then the scientific view that it's just biologically impossible.
And that's the tension we want to explore. Our mission for you in this deep dive is to see how this one story can be all those things at once. It's not just about believing or disbelieving.
Right. It's about understanding why it resonates and how different frameworks try to make sense of these really challenging details. So let's start with the narrative itself from Surah Al-Kahf.
Okay, so the setup is this group of young men, the Fitja. They live in a pagan society under a tyrant who demands idol worship.
And they just refuse. They're uncompromising monotheists. They believe in one God, and that's it.
So they're facing this terrible choice. Either renounce their faith or, face death. They choose a third option.
To flee. They leave the city entirely and find refuge in a remote cave.
And they're not alone. This is such a great detail. A dog goes with them.
Yes, and the text gives this really strong visual of the dog stretching its forelegs out at the entrance, almost like a guardian.
A symbol of loyalty right there at the threshold. So once they're inside, God puts them into this deep sleep.
And this is the core of the miracle. It's not just a long nap. The text says it lasts for 309 lunar years.
309 years. I mean, just think about that.
And this is where the sources really dig into the mechanics of their preservation. How could a human body survive that long? The text offers clues.
Okay, what are they?
Well, first, there's the position of the cave. It's described in a way that suggests it was probably facing north. The sun would rise and set without hitting them directly.
Ah, so it's a kind of natural refrigeration. It keeps their bodies from decaying in the heat.
Pretty much. Environmental control. But then there's the second detail, which is even more specific.
This is the part about turning them.
Yes, the text says God turned them to the right and left while they slept.
That's so specific, not just to sleep, but being actively cared for.
It's a really crucial detail. It implies this isn't just a state of suspended animation. It's a continuous process of protection.
Okay, so fast forward 3 centuries. They finally wake up.
And their sense of time is completely broken. They're confused, asking each other how long they slept. They figure maybe a day or part of a day.
They have no idea what's happened.
None at all. So they send one of the youths into the city to buy food, and they give him these old coins.
And that's the moment of revelation, right?
That's the moment the miracle becomes a public sign. Naya. He gets to the city, and of course, everything has changed. The tyrant is gone, the whole society has adopted monotheism, and his coins are ancient relics.
And they realize God's power over time itself. The proof was in the sleep.
Exactly.
All right, let's pivot from the story to the big challenges. I mean, we have to start with the obvious one, the biology.
Biological impossibility, yeah.
Simply put, a human being cannot sleep for 300 years without food, water, or both. Well, without their body completely breaking down. It's just not how our physiology works.
And the interesting thing is how the theological sources deal with that. They don't try to find some pseudoscientific explanation. No, they embrace the impossibility. They say, that's the whole point. It's a miracle. By definition, a miracle is an event that breaks the laws of nature to prove God's direct power.
So the scientific objection is actually evidence for the miracle in that framework?
Precisely. It's not a bug. It's the feature. It's a test of faith, not a lab experiment you can replicate.
Okay, but then why include that detail about turning your bodies? If you're already suspending the laws of nature, why bother with a detail that sounds so medical?
That is such a sharp question. And modern commentators point to that exact detail. Today, we know that if a person is immobile, say, in a coma, you have to turn them regularly.
To prevent pressure sores, bed sores.
Exactly. Without that, their tissue would start to decay within weeks, maybe months. You'd get fatal infections. So the fact that the text mentions this specific action,
it feels incredibly modern. It suggests a level of care that goes beyond just magically freezing them in time.
It does. It paints a picture of intricate, active preservation. Even within the miracle, there's this internal logic of care. It's a really powerful detail.
It is. Okay, let's move to the second big challenge, which is the historical one. The idea of borrowing.
Right. The legend of the seven sleepers of Ephesus.
This is a Christian story that's much older than the Quranic account, isn't it?
By centuries, yes. It was recorded in Syriac text back in the 5th and 6th centuries. It was a very well-known story across the entire Near East.
And we know the audience at the time knew about it. The sources say that the idolaters in Mecca actually went to Jewish rabbis to find a gotcha question for Muhammad.
And this was one of them. Ask him about the youths who slept for ages. It was meant to be a test of his knowledge.
So if everyone knew the story, doesn't that make the argument that it was just, borrowed even stronger?
You would think so. But the theological response is to look at what's different, at what the Quran omits.
Okay, so what does it leave out?
It strips out all the specific markers of the Christian version. The names of the Roman emperors, Decius and Theodosius, are gone. Specific Christian dogmas about the nature of the resurrection, also gone.
It universalizes it.
Perfectly put. It universalizes the story to focus on one single core message. Pure monotheism. The belief in one God, or Tawad.
So from that perspective, the similarities aren't plagiarism.
They're seen as confirmation. The idea is that the true story was preserved, but imperfectly, in earlier traditions. The Quran comes to correct the record and purify the message, restoring its original monotheistic core.
That completely flips the script. The similarity becomes proof of authenticity, not of borrowing.
It's a fascinating reframing.
This is where it gets really clever, I think. The way the text handles ambiguity. For instance, it brings up the debate about how many sleepers there were.
It does. It says some people will guess 3 or 5 or 7, and then it just cuts the debate short. It says, "My Lord knows best their number."
It refuses to answer the question.
And that refusal is a rhetorical tool. The sources argue it's designed to teach intellectual humility.
A kind of critique of human nature, right? We love to argue about trivia.
Absolutely. It's a direct command to stop getting bogged down in useless details. The exact number, their names, the cave's GPS coordinates, and to focus on the actual moral of the story.
The lesson about God's power over life, death, and time.
The substance, not the spectacle. By not answering, it makes the core message impossible to ignore.
That's brilliant. And speaking of details that seem minor but aren't, let's go back to the dog. Why is the dog so important to the narrative?
Well, the dog is a symbol of loyalty, of course. But there's a deeper cultural layer here. In some traditions in the Near East at that time, dogs were often seen as unclean.
So including the dog so prominently is a deliberate choice.
It's a very deliberate choice. The text honors this creature, elevating it simply because it was loyal to the righteous. Its faithfulness to the youths who stood for Tawad is what matters.
So it's a message that God's grace isn't just for humans.
I think so, yeah. It suggests that mercy extends to any creature that aligns itself with truth and loyalty. It's a remarkably inclusive idea.
It really is. Okay, one last detail that seems like a contradiction but isn't. The timeline. 300 years and add 9. Why phrase it that way?
This is one of my favorite parts. Many scholars point out that this is actually a subtle piece of scientific and cultural awareness. Well, 300 solar years is almost exactly 309 lunar years.
So it's acknowledging both calendars.
Exactly. The solar calendar was used by the Romans and Byzantines, while the Arabs used a lunar calendar. The text, by using this phrasing, is basically nodding to both systems of timekeeping. It's grounding the miraculous timeline in the two major cultural contexts of its audience.
That is incredibly sophisticated.
It's tiny detail, but it shows a deep awareness of the world it was speaking to.
So after all this, what does it all mean for us today? If we step back, what are the universal values here?
I think at its core, the story is a powerful allegory for alienation. It really champions the courage of these young people to stand up for their principles against a corrupt system.
Integrity over conformity.
Absolutely. Even when that integrity means you have to completely withdraw from society.
Yeah.
That spiritual sleep can sometimes be necessary to protect your soul from a toxic environment.
It's also a story about how temporary power is. The tyrant and his whole kingdom just vanished, but the faithful were preserved.
And you see echoes of this everywhere in culture. The idea of waking up in the future, the Rip Van Winkle trope. But even in science, metaphorically, you have research into suspended animation for things like long-distance space travel.
Therapeutic hypothermia, things like that.
Right, and historically, it's just this undeniable bridge. It shows how much shared heritage and storytelling there was between Christian and Islamic traditions back in late antiquity.
It's amazing how one narrative can be a historical legend, a scientific puzzle, and a moral guide, all at the same time. It really just depends on the lens you use to look at it.
And that brings us, I think, to the final, most challenging philosophical question that the sources raise. We've talked about belief in the unseen, or al-ghaib.
The things that can't be proven empirically.
Exactly. So if the whole purpose of a miracle story like this is to test and build faith in that unseen realm, then what happens when our modern world demands proof for everything? Verifiable, carbon-dated physical evidence.
Does that demand completely miss the point of the story?
Does it fundamentally negate the spiritual test the narrative was designed to be? Perhaps the story's power is because it's unverifiable. It forces a choice.
A choice between what you can prove and what you can believe.
Precisely. And that tension is something to really think about. What is the value for any of us in embracing an idea that can't be proven? What purpose does that serve? That's the question to ponder long after this deep dive is over.